Welcome back on the AM show. It's time now for the news review, and we're joined by none other than the Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa, Sulemana Brahima. Mr. Brahima, a very good morning to you, sir. Hello, Mr. Brahima.
Hi, Ben. Good morning.
Good to have you join the conversation one more time. Let me just let you know, those of you watching us, that this segment is brought to you kind courtesy of Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. And here's what they're doing for all of us gratis. They're offering free prostate screening, free female fertility screening. If you want to get screening for any of these and other matters, just go to Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. And here's where you can find them in Accra and beyond. Here in Accra, they're in Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. In Kumasi, Kronum Abuehia, behind the Angel Educational Complex. Takrade Anaji Estate, Tema Community 22. Then there's Techiman Hanswa and Esiama in Zima. You can also reach them on the following lines. The first, 0244 867 068. Alternatively, you could reach them on 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But gentlemen, ladies, the start of the news review. And Sule, I know that these are exciting religious times for you because we often have this shade, Easter and Ramadan coming full circle, side by side. How is your Ramadan going, Mr. Brahima?
Well, it's indeed a great time, great religious time, but Ramadan is coinciding with the Christian festivities of Easter. And so far, so good. Today is about the 19th day of Ramadan, so some 11 or so days more to go. And so far, so good.
Let me be a little mischievous because I was teasing a colleague at work the other day. It appears, just as with us Christians, when we start Lent, which precedes Easter, sometimes there is the temptation. You know, you've been eating for quite a while. So when you get to that new phase where you have to fast, the likelihood of forgetting is there. Sometimes you may even reach into the fridge. Oh, I feel so thirsty. You reach into the fridge, then it hits you. Oh, I'm fasting. That's why I've not drunk water. Even at this stage, after so many years, it happens to some Christians. Does it happen to you as well, as an example? Just sharing on the faith.
No, I think it is something that can happen. And it has actually happened to me before, years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but this must have been about maybe 10 to 12 years ago. That was the very first day of Ramadan, so the very first day of fasting. And I traveled to friends in a nearby community. And, we got there, and after some time, drinks were being served here and there. And before I realized I had taken some of the drink, before I remembered, but I'm supposed to be fasting. But what it meant was that, I lost that fast on that day and had to pay back after Ramadan. So it's something that can really happen, especially on the very first day. If you are not careful, anything can happen.
Mm. And indeed, my colleague Anna Sabit was just sharing thoughts on that, for example, if you need to donate blood, you can't do it on an empty stomach. So if there's the need within Ramadan, you would have to eat, fill up, get your system active, and then you would donate the blood. But you have to make up for that day after Ramadan. And then I found that to be so beautiful. So more power to your elbow as you complete this phase. For some of us, we are done with Lent, so now we are chilling. So more strength to you as you complete this phase. And when the Eid comes, we'll be sure to come and chill with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Great. All right, so let's get into some more serious matters. Today, we don't have any newspapers with us, today being a holiday, but there are crucial matters that we can contemplate. The first one I'll bring up, and the next one, I'll play a video. But the first one has to do, in fact, we could get the video of that as well. That assault on a police officer in Wano, Akotosu. And about 6 people involved, 5 of them apprehended, about 7 of them, 2 still at large. it's becoming quite a development, isn't it? The rampant attacks on security operatives. The other day, I saw another video of some police officers or some sort of task force or something tied to the security operatives, and it was a drug related thing, and they were beaten to a pulp. Suleimana, my heart was in my mouth. One of them was being beaten with a pestle, like, you know, the one we used to pound fufu, and it was just terrible. Then fast forward just a day or two after that, we see this incident. We remember the one in Axim where alleged galamseyers attacked police officers. What is going on? I can't comprehend. I don't know what you make of it.
Well, it's a very, very unfortunate development that we are witnessing. And it is the same Ghana that we are in. We used not to see a lot of these things with the level of frequency that we are experiencing now. And it should tell us that increasingly in our society, indiscipline is growing, and indiscipline not only on the part of civilians, but also on the part of the security men and women in the security services. Look, Ben, there is no doubt about the way recruitments are being done now, and the fact that these days it is not about eligibility and qualification per maybe education, your height, your background, and all of that, but more about, are you related to the MP? Are you a cousin to the constituency chairman? Are you a nephew of, you know, the party organizer, and so on and so forth. So you have all manner of people being recruited into the various security services, and that certainly is breeding some, you know, unwanted levels of indiscipline. But related to that is the fact that as a result of how this country is being led, how it is being governed, from religion to politics, everything is broken down. No morals, no values. It's all about making money. And so for me, these are the reasons why we are seeing increasingly the levels of indiscipline in our society, including attacks on security men. But when I say that it is not just limited to civilians, you remember the recent incident in Accra Central, where you had military men and police officers in open, you know, violent exchanges. These are things that I don't remember the last time, you know, we would see them happening. So for me, it is a reflection of the general breakdown of discipline in our society. And the earlier we tackle it, the better. And it's, as I said, because
how do we do that? It appears to be systemic. How do we do that? Is it just about the recruitment? Is it about continuous training? Is it about how the security operatives engage, you know, civilians and all of that? What are you looking at? What specifically?
So I think that it starts from leadership. Look, I have had the privilege of engaging with a certain retired security officer who at one point, whilst in the service, was basically in charge of recruitment. And he tells me, and at some point even brought out documents about persons who went through the examinations, the recruitment exercise, and the list of persons who were supposed to be recruited. And he says, look, if you like, take this list and go into the service and find out how many of these people were eventually recruited. So at the end of the day, it is not about the official list of those who went through the process and got, you know, qualified to be recruited. It's about, as I said, political influences and who is related to who eventually getting recruited. We remember the incident of Double in the Ayawaso West Wogon incident. Yeah. So first of all, recruitment is a big issue. But the second point is that, look, leaders in this country must get to appreciate that we need a society that is disciplined, a society that is orderly, for them to even enjoy whatever loot that they are having. And that if we end up having criminals in the police, criminals in the army, and so on, these people are going to hunt them down after they exit office and would want to enjoy the loot from their office. There is no doubt, if you ask any police officer in this country today, he will tell you one of the major things that have happened is that since the appointment of IGP Dr. Dampare, there has been strenuous efforts to improve discipline in the police service. And indeed, a lot is happening. A lot of people have gone on interdiction, police officers, on interdiction over this short period that Dr. Dampare has been the IG, and for good reasons. There are people who would say, oh, this IG is doing a lot of interdictions. But if you speak to those who are genuine and those who understand the security services, they will tell you, look, if Dr. Dampare should leave the service today, what he will be remembered for, at least at this stage, is the fact that he brought so much indiscipline in the service never seen before. But even as that is being done, see what is happening. So it's a question of leadership. Let us encourage the IGP to continue the extraordinary leadership that he is providing. But beyond him, we need ministers, we need MPs, we need the president, we need the vice president, all of them, to begin to act in ways that would exude that kind of moral attitude that we want to see in our country. And then that will cascade down to chief directors, to DCEs, to members of parliament, to assembly members, to unit committee members. Then we will be rebuilding a society that we all want to have. But the way things are going today, look, it is all about money. You have presidential aspirants in the opposition party, for example, saying, look, police ni be soldier ni as if these security establishments are meant for people whose party, is in power. But that is not it. It's about every Ghanaian. At the end of the day, whoever must get into the police service or the army or the fire service or immigration and so on, basically must be a Ghanaian of sound mind, 18 years and above, has the required qualification in terms of education, in terms of body size, and so on. It's not surprising these days. You see a police officer, armed, and then you ask yourself, hey, I thought police, they said you must be 5.8 or something to be qualified. But this person certainly would be like 4.2. So how did he get into the service? But we have those people in the service. And I believe that as we go along, if we continue to have leaders like Dr. Dampare at the helm of affairs, and he is given the free hand, because sometimes you want to do what you think is the best, but Charlie, if you are not careful, that will lead you to quitting your position or being removed from your position. So if he's given the free hand to work, I'm sure we would see some improvement. The same with the Ghana Armed Forces. I think the leadership there now is doing incredible work, but they need to do more, and they need to be given the free hand to work. And all of us as citizens must also begin to appreciate the importance of being disciplined. Otherwise, one day our country is going to break down.
Now, the second issue, which also comes with a video, I'm hoping we can play that video, has to do with something disturbing. So the current Minister of Agriculture, also Member of Parliament for Abetifi, says the current New Patriotic Party will not hand over power to the NDC, whatever happens in 2024. According to him, the party will use whatever means necessary to remain in power in 2024. I want you to watch this video, Suleimana, and tell me what you make of it. So we'll take a look at the video shortly. But he also adds that if the NDC... Okay, so that is the video. I'm sure you've seen it already. What do you make of it? Because we have a democratic dispensation. And interestingly, Mr. President said recently that it is not those at the Electoral Commission who matter, but the votes, the ballot of ordinary Ghanaians. That matters. That is what should count towards the selection of a leader. Other people have taken that to mean, in a way, clothed acceptance of what was about to happen. I'm talking about the nominees, Dr. Apia Hene and Hajia Tijani, to the Electoral Commission, who are considered to be partisan elements. But on the back of this by Brian Achampong, what do you make of all of these happenings?
Well, so first of all, I call it a senseless incitement.
You call it what? A senseless incitement?
It's a senseless incitement. It's needless and senseless. I've seen people trying to justify it, trying to garnish it, trying to give it a different meaning. But whatever is said, we've all heard what he said. It's not about something that is being reported. We've heard it. I listened to it yesterday, and I must say that perhaps I wasn't shocked, given that it was coming from the man Brian Achampong. We know the Ayawaso West Wogon violence and the fact that the Emil Short Commission eventually said that Brian must be held responsible for deploying those security men to go and be in charge of a by-election. Even though before the commission, Brian did not say he deployed them, he did not deny that the people came from his secretariat. And at the time, he was a minister of state in charge of national security at the presidency. If you recall, not too long ago, a few weeks or so ago, when he was being vetted by Parliament, the current minority leader, Dr. Atto Forson, tried to ask him, he asked him the question, how can he trust him, given his involvement in the Ayawaso West Wogon incidents? And if you recall, Brian Achampong was shocked because he said, Atuba, you are my friend. You are the person who should vouch for me in terms of my integrity. And ended up almost exclaiming, hey, Atu. So when I watched this yesterday, I said to myself, oh, okay. I can understand that indeed Atto Forson is a friend to Brian and knows Brian very well. And that is the reason why when it came to a matter of national interest, Atto perhaps put aside their friendship and really did what was necessary for the public, because he is a friend and he knows him very well. And Brian says, Atto, but you know me very well. And therefore, it wasn't surprising that Atto, who is somebody who knows Brian very well, put their friendship aside and really went on the tangent of national interest to question him about his reputation, his integrity when it comes to matters of violence. To say that the MPP will never hand over power to the NDC is a treasonable comment. I think at the end of the day, it is about the will of the people that would prevail and not the will of hooligans and the will of thugs. That would never prevail in a country like Ghana that has chosen for itself democracy.
Now, just because you make that point, I want to sneak in two bits. There's the Member of Parliament for Ebuakwa South, Samuel Atachia, who says this was just political talk, what Brian Achampong said. It was political talk. I know for a fact that if it were on the other foot, he would sound different. He would be speaking differently. But I think Mr. Bande, who is an executive of the NDC, has said that, look, you remember up north, one of their party people passed some comments, which he claims are about 10% of what Brian Achampong said, and he was apprehended. What then should happen if you say these are treasonable comments? Do you reasonably foresee that anything would happen to the new ministerial appointee? Do you foresee that?
Not exactly. And in fact, I don't also subscribe to the idea that this amounts to a statement that warrants an arrest. This is a communication of intention that, look, we're going to do everything to win power, and we're not going to hand over power to the NDC. It's a communication of intention. And that is why, for example, the appointment of the two partisan persons to the Electoral Commission should raise the alarms and ring the bells in our ears. Perhaps it is part of everything that the party will do to win power, as Brian is letting us know. Because if not, I mean, yes, I don't expect that the president would appoint persons who are affiliated to the NDC to the Electoral Commission. But there are individuals that, people would say, oh, well, these are persons of integrity. These are persons that we don't know their political affiliations. These are persons that we believe would always act right. And of course, the party people would know that behind the scenes, they are members of their party in this whole country. So the MPP could not find persons like that, except to appoint persons who are manifestly and openly partisan, in their conduct. And these people certainly at the EC would be interested in whatever they would do to make the party win power. And I'm happy that maybe Brian is letting us know the steps that they are taking to win power by all means. But, I mean, what I tell people is that if people like Jerry Rawlings, with the charisma, with the courage, and all of that, young as he was in 2000, relatively, handed over power at a time when his peers elsewhere, and in fact, Rawlings left power, and after 20 years, some of his peers were still in power. Even today, you go to countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara has changed the constitution to stay in power. Alpha Conde tried it in Guinea and stayed in power until he was ousted. But Rawlings at that time did it despite the charisma, the aura, the public support, the courage, being a military man. If Rawlings did that, nobody in this country can resist the will of the people. If the Ghanaian people say it is NDC they want, not even the Ghana military, the armed forces, can resist or can say that, no, we wouldn't agree. So I think that Brian is blowing hot air, but as I said, it's a very senseless comment and certainly something that amounts to, treasonable intention. But I don't think that it's a committal of an offense at this stage that we will say, okay, he should be arrested. I think by now, if he's really somebody who cares about his own integrity, reputation, and all of that, he should be worried about the public, criticism and the uproar. Unless, of course, he is one of those who thinks that my claim to fame in my political party is to make some of these reckless comments, because a lot of people have had appointments as a result of building a reputation of always making reckless comments in defense or in favor of their political parties.
Interesting thoughts. Let's wrap with a few. And that bit I brought to you was from Atachia, interacting with MFR Pau on the probe. But in other stories on myjoyonline.com, our very own Iñaki Williams scores in back-to-back games as Athletic Bilbao beat Espanyol. Then IMF relief will come to naught, nothing, zero, zilch, if businesses collapse. That's according to Guta. They are saying so. There's also this interesting bit. Sweet Mother hitmaker sold more copies than any of the Beatles. So why haven't you heard of him? You can check out that very interesting story. And back to sports. Jordan Ayew double helps Crystal Palace stage stunning comeback against Leeds United. Let's go to the Graphic Online. And they also talk about the NDC demanding Brian Achampon's arrest. That story is there. A story that was on myjoyonline.com, which I missed. Kwame Pianim warns of Ghana's economic recolonization. He's been warning of that. Let me just get to that story. And economist Kwame Pianim has raised concerns about the direction of government's activities following an economic crisis in Ghana. In an interview with Joy FM, he criticized the government's trend of ceding control to foreign experts and resulting to constant borrowing from the IMF, which he sees as an indication of incompetence. You recall that recently when Kamala Harris was in the country, we were also told about some representative who was going to be in our country to help us with our economic situation. He expressed disappointment in the leadership of the country, stating that he expected a better performance after 66 years of independence. Quoting him, he said, "We have a finance minister who borrowed and parliament that supported him to borrow. We have now somebody from the US Treasury sitting in the Ministry of Finance to hold Ken Ofori-Atta's hand. Ken told me once, we went to school with these same white boys. We are just as good as they," he said. So if we are just as good, how exactly did we end up here? Let me just see. Yes, and on My Joy Online, going back to My Joy Online, Kwame Pinum says, Akufo-Addo should not sign 3 new taxes into law. What do you make of that economics related story? What do you make of it? We sat in class with these white boys. We're as good as they are. But still, even the very young ones, if you recall the IMF representative who came to Ghana to help us scale the hurdle of the staff level agreement, some said, such a young person, but they'll be dictating to our very old, supposedly learned people. Your take, Suleiman?
Well, it's unfortunate we find ourselves where we are now. Ghana certainly is blessed. And I believe that any leader who genuinely wants to lead this country into prosperity can do so. Right. Of course, we do have the global economic dynamics. I believe every country pursues their own interest. The advanced countries would always act in ways that are in their own interest. Nonetheless, I believe if we have a leader who genuinely wants to leave a legacy of moving this country towards prosperity, it is possible.
Right.
Whenever I travel out of the country, and by my work, I do quite a lot, sometimes I marvel. I ask myself, so when our presidents, vice presidents, members of parliament, ministers, when they travel to these countries, don't they ask themselves, what at all is making these nations prosperous, better than where we come from, despite our cocoa, our gold, our diamonds, our bauxite, fertile land, youthful population, and so on and so forth. First of all, it's a question of leadership. Unfortunately, yes, I do admit that a number of countries are going through struggles. There is no doubt about that.
Right.
We are in a global economic turbulence. Kenya, there's been demonstrations upon demonstrations in the last weeks. South Africa is going through the same. Even some of the advanced countries are going through challenges. But how are we as a country really trying to deal with these challenges? We have had a government that is pursuing very autocratic policies. From one policy to the other, you expect that the government will learn that the way to go is to build consensus, is to engage the relevant stakeholders so that there is policy buy-in before they are rolled out. From e-levy, it was about autocracy. We want to do this. From other levies that have been imposed, it's about we are doing this, whether Ghanaians like it or not. We wake up one day and the minister just basically announces that we have removed road tolls with immediate effect. Yet, as the venerable Kwame Pinum says, we have a parliament that is split, and you expect that indeed parliament would hold the executive accountable. Surprisingly, Ben, and I ask myself,
do you see that happening even with our so-called hung parliament? Do you see that happening in real terms?
Not at all. Not at all. But you see, what I ask myself sometimes, Ben, is that, so how come we have 137 members of parliament from the MPP and one independent member of parliament who has aligned with the MPP? Of course, he has always been an MPP member. And these 138 persons, at no point would any of them or a group of them stand up and say, look, we are Ghanaians. We represent our people. This policy is coming from our government, but we disagree. Never. On the opposition side.
But to be fair, you remember yes. the point about removing Ken Ofori-Atta. We saw 80
No, but
plus of them coming together, banding together and saying, he must go. That at least, if you say never, I would dispute that, because at least on that occasion, they came
no,
together and said,
but that was
against
not about
the
government
will of the
policy.
president.
That was not about government policy. That is not about the government policy.
Right.
And secondly, yes, they did that, but where has it gone? Ken Ofori-Atta is still at post, still introducing very obnoxious, unpopular dictatorial policies. Ken has been, look, I just can't understand. On the side of the opposition, it is the same thing. Oh, we oppose this. We will never endorse this. We will never do this. At the end of the day, 137 people, it will go through. And you also ask them, you ask the question, how come the 137 MPs, we've never also seen any time when one or a group of them would say, yes, I am from the opposition, but I think this government policy is good and I'm going to endorse it. You see that in the advanced countries, in the parliaments of the advanced countries. Is it that we don't have people of conscience? And if we do, why can't individuals stand up and say, look, this is going to be good for my constituency?
And on the other end, like you rightly mentioned, when the vote in Parliament took place on the ministerial nominees, for example, you could realize that who knows how many on the majority side may have voted against some of these nominees. But you could tell from the numbers that a lot more, maybe 30 plus of those in the minority, had voted for some of these people. You saw the backlash. They were called traitors. They were shamed, so to speak. There were social media posts about this person voted this way, that person voted that way. So this bit about a conscience, it's a two-way street, NPP, NDC. I don't think, with the whipping system we have, I don't think they can vote with any proper conscience. It's all about the party and towing its line.
Well, that's really unfortunate, and that is getting us to where we are. And I hope that one day we would get MPs like PC Apiofori back into the chamber, who would say, yes, I'm from the governing party.
Very controversial figure.
I don't think this is the best thing. I would use my power in Parliament to fight corruption and stand up against corruption. Yes, people would denigrate me, people will attack me, but it is about my conscience.
Right.
I think that is what we should be getting to. And unfortunately, we don't have that. When you talk, they say contempt. They will invite you to Parliament, for contempt, and so on. I don't think that this is how we can build a country. Right. I know there are people in Parliament who really would want to do the right thing, and I would encourage them to stand up to defend their own conscience at every moment. Well, it doesn't matter. You can lose your seat.
Exactly. I was about to talk about the consequences. It could be dire for anybody like that. And there are ways of maybe even removing someone like that as far as parliamentary processes or procedures are concerned. And if you're ousted from your end in Parliament or your caucus, that could also have consequences. So I'm sure all of them, when they look at our political framework, they would say, look, my reality is my reality. My people, even when my people say something and it goes against what my party is directing me, it becomes a fine line, a tight rope to expect them to walk. They would be caught between that proverbial hard rock and the deep blue sea. But just to wrap the conversation, I'm sure if we talk about this, we can talk the whole day and not end. I want to go on the BBC. There's one story I'll highlight because it talks about a Ghanaian and a trend. But some of the other stories there, China rehearses sealing off Taiwan in latest drill, sealing off in quotes. You can check out that story. There's also father mourns murdered daughters at West Bank funeral. There's been a new inflammation, if you like, or conflagration of fighting between the Israelis, those on the West Bank, Palestinians, among others. BBC objects to government-funded Twitter label, and dominant Ram, if you're interested in golf, wins Masters as Koepka fades. There's also Premier League reaction. Arsenal dropped points in title race. They were up by 2-0 against Liverpool, and they allowed Liverpool to claw back a point. Those are some interesting stories on the BBC. But the one I wanted to focus on, Suleiman Abrahima, from Ghana to Germany, tracking down the owner of a lost wallet. So It's been about what 3,500 kilometers from Lampedusa, that is from Ghana, and this wallet was discarded by its owner, Juan Opoku, Richard Opoku. He had been in Germany, I'm just summarizing the story, for a number of years, and you know there are a lot of these people who travel, go through the island of Lampedusa, end up in Europe, and sometimes if they perish, their family members will never hear from them again. That was part of the story of Richard Opoku. But then, after many years, this person stumbled on his wallet with his driver's license inside. And then, for some reason, pursued it and was able to trace him. Now, it took this journalist all the way to the Bono region. And finally, they were able to find his sister. And they found out he was in Germany. And the person went and interviewed him. It's a brilliant story that you can get into. There are so many from Nigeria, Benin, and others who also make that very dangerous journey. But I bring it up because of this. Last year in the first quarter, 3,000 nurses fled our country. I've always said, I have friends, doctors, nurses, especially doctors and nurses. I can name some of, I will not mention names, but I can count some of them who traveled just last year. I know a pharmacist who left. I know an accountant who left. I know so many, and this is just my clutch of friends. So how about Suleiman Abrahim's friends? How about the next person's friends who have also left? Recently, and I don't think we're taking this seriously enough, the Ghana Health Service Director General, Dr. Patrick Kumabwaje, said that it's becoming a problem, especially with the nurses. So many of them are leaving. We could get to the point where it impacts the delivery of healthcare. What do you make of this situation in the economic dynamics we are facing? That will be my final bit to you, Suleimana.
Well, it's a development that is being closely observed. You cannot blame those who would want to leave their country. Indeed, you have ministers of state, senior government officials who would prefer to go and deliver in the US so that their children will be US citizens. And these are people who are serving in high positions that are supposed, to help make this country a great place so that in the future, their children will be proud to be Ghanaians. They would rather prefer that they go and deliver elsewhere so their kids will become citizens of other countries. So you therefore cannot blame the ordinary nurse who is working in a facility with no basic equipment and sometimes have to help pregnant women deliver using flashlights. You certainly cannot blame them. It all comes down to the country we are building and whether or not we have leadership at any point in time that is making people have hope. People have the aspirations that continuing in the work that I'm doing is taking me to a greater place and would give me a better future than if I were to quit and go elsewhere. You would talk to some of these nurses, and if they tell you the struggles that they go through in these places that they go to, whether the UK or wherever, sometimes you are tempted to say, wouldn't you be better off in your own country with the independence that you have and all of that? But they would justifiably tell you that what I make here in a week is perhaps more than what I make in a month in Ghana. And I need to support my family, I need to support my people, and so on. So it's a very sad development, but it appears that the leadership doesn't care, and therefore you cannot also blame the people who are taking advantage of whatever little opportunities that are opening up for them. I know of friends and relatives who are desperate to embark on that journey. As I said, it is difficult to convince them because apart from the fact that their salary may be meager and they are working under terrible conditions, you don't see any sense of hope for this country. The country is being burdened with debts. Your children, my children, may inherit a worse situation in terms of debt, in terms of the moral values of our country. Unfortunately, we are not doing what we are expected to do. I was reading recently when President Obama talked about the fact that it is morally, not to quote him, but basically morally wrong, morally fraudulent to leave the future generation with a burden through our actions. Unfortunately, that is the Ghana we are building. A Ghana where future generations would have more debts to pay. Future generations may not even have clean water. Future generations may struggle to have better environment to live in.
Right.
And it's all because of the kind of leadership and the kind of, persons that we are and the actions that we are taking today. The earlier we think through this and as individuals commit towards reform, the better for all of us, the better
Right.
for future generations, and the better for the future of Ghana.
On that bit, just to our audience and to you as well, Suleiman Abrahima, look out for what I'll be doing on Friday in my blunt thoughts, because I have something that many of us have not contemplated that I'll tie to this situation as part of my discourse. But thank you, Mr. Abrahima, for joining us, for doing us the honors this holiday morning. And once more, all the best with Ramadan. Look forward to seeing me when the Eid comes.
Thank you so much, and happy Easter Monday to all our Christian friends. And may we have a better celebration and reflect on building a better Ghana for all of us.
Amen, and thank you. Suleiman Abrahima, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. This segment brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They're offering free prostate screening, free female fertility screening. Locate them here in Accra, Spintex opposite the Shell signboard. In Kumasi, Kronuma here behind the Angel Educational Complex. In Takrade Anaji Estate in Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa and Esiama Nzima. You can also call them on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease, and in fact, the end of the news review.